Welcome back to another Outside the Box Reviews Giant Monster Monday. And today we're looking at the Bandai Tamashii Nations SH Monsterarts Little Godzilla figure. Little Godzilla, I believe, was one of the early web exclusive figures put out in the SH Monsterarts line, but was brought over to the States as a regular release by Bluefin. And while it was a figure I knew eventually I would add to my collection, it wasn't one of the ones I was most excited for by a long shot. But I got this guy as a Christmas present, and now I can officially cross Little Godzilla off my to-get list for SH Monsterarts. Little Godzilla does come with an accessory, a kind of interesting little base here. It's two of the standard Tamashii stands that we're familiar with, done in a very nice amber color. They actually do come apart, and they come with these little clips here that you could use to pin them together. And I guess you could use these clips to pin any of the stands together, but of course they share that amber coloring that fits with this set. And up on here you have 4 crystals, each nicely sculpted. We have 2 shorter ones and 2 longer ones. They're really cool translucent plastic, but they kind of have a milky crystally effect going on with their paint, or I guess their molding color, not really their paint. And all of them are hinged at the base, so you can move them in and out, as well as swivel them on the base itself. Though unfortunately, when you swivel them, sometimes they tend to work themselves out of the base, and then you have to put them back in there. But this is supposed to, of course, replicate the crystal cage that Space Godzilla puts Little Godzilla in, so it's very neat in that respect that you can hinge them all together and make kind of a trap out of them. And one thing to note is these look a bit different than the ones we got with the Space Godzilla figure on his display base. These ones almost look like they're made out of aluminum foil, have a very shiny silver paint job to them, as opposed to this translucent, which is much, much cooler. For Little Godzilla himself, he is very, very well sculpted. He's a great looking representation of a very goofy looking character. Got those big kind of orangey yellow expressive eyes, a nice green paint job over the whole figure with highlights and lowlights mixed in, so we have some very bright greens in places and some very dark, almost blacks in places, but I believe it's all just shades of green, which is really nice. The eyes are also very nice and shiny, which is another thing I really like on these kind of mid to higher end figures, where you actually get that kind of glint of light in the eyes of the character. Inside Little Godzilla's mouth, got his tongue painted in there very nice, his gums. Got his nice white teeth in there because, of course, he is a baby, so he doesn't have all the years of tartar buildup like his dad does. Got his little Godzilla ears going on here. His spine's on his back to transition out of the green into a nice white, kind of looking like pieces of cauliflower stuck to the back of the suit. More yellowy kind of chest here. Very odd looking chest. Just movie accurate, but just a goofy looking design for this character. Of course, he has his short, stumpy little arms with his 4 fingers, short little legs, stumpy little Godzilla toes, and then his very short little tail back here. Little Godzilla is probably one of my least favorite designs. I think I actually even prefer Minya over him, even though they're both really ugly and goofy looking. But they have knocked out another figure that looks great. The only real problem here kind of comes hand in hand with Articulation is this was back in what I like to refer to as the SH Monsterarts gap stage. They've gotten a lot better since then, but this figure, when you start moving joints around, there are a lot of gaps in this figure, a lot of just areas on him that don't look right when you start articulating him, because there's just no way to line up all the parts. There's areas where you could see straight through the figure if he's in a certain pose, so that is a bit problematic. But let's get into the articulation. Little Godzilla does have a hinge on his jaw, letting it open and shut. This is from the era when these figures almost entirely consisted of ball joints, which I think leads to a lot of the gaps in the figure. So it's possible this is on a ball joint, but the way the figure's sculpted, it won't rotate or anything in there. No head articulation, which is a bit disappointing. He doesn't really move his head in the movie, but there's definitely room in there. We could have gotten a ball joint, I think. We have a ball joint at the shoulder. It moves in and out, forward and back very easily. Pretty good range of motion. We have kind of a double joint at his elbow, but we don't quite get 90 degrees out of it. We can also rotate at the elbow a little bit. We have a ball joint at his wrist. We have what I believe are 2 ball joints at his waist, so we get a really good range of motion out of him, but it does lead to some very odd looking gaps because his chest and his lower torso here are more the same protrusion coming off the body, and this very skinny inner chest here just looks weird. Go too far forward and there's a big gap in his spines. Go too far back, there's like a gap in his stomach. You kind of just have to find the right balance there and get him to look more like he did in the movie. Kind of get his chest down onto that middle torso section, and then it flows considerably better, but it does still leave some gaps. I did also notice with this figure that he kind of pops apart at times. When I first got mine out of the package, his torso was actually only partly on. And it took me a while to realize that I could actually push him back together and close up some of what I thought were really, really bad gaps. But now they're just kind of bad gaps. The legs on ball joints as well, so you can move them in and out, forward and back. Forward and back is kind of limited to this V motion because of the shape of his lower torso. And of course, in and out's pretty limited as well. They did do some extra sculpting in here to try to bridge the gaps in his legs, but I think because they tried not to limit articulation too much, it's not super successful. We get a double joint at the knee, which actually has a great range. I didn't expect this, but it looks like you would just be able to bend it back a little bit and have it stop, but the recess in the back of his leg actually lets you get a really nice bend out of it, and it doesn't really seem to break up the sculpt. It would be pretty much how the suit would wrinkle to form something like that. And then the foot is on a ball joint, so you get nice movement side to side, up and down, as well as a pivot to it. The tail is the least articulated tail in Monsterarts history. It's on a ball joint, but there's not much side to side or up and down motion. You could really just rotate it, which doesn't really fit the character anyway. For a size comparison, here we have him next to his daddy and I guess what, Space Godzilla's the creepy uncle. These are both the SH Monsterarts, the Space Godzilla obviously, and the original release 94 Godzilla. And I think little Godzilla stands a little too tall. I believe in the movie he came up to about the hip on Godzilla, if I remember correctly. So he is a little oversized. If you substitute out the Monsterarts version for the NECA version, this one's standing a little bit taller, puts little Godzilla a little more in scale, but still not quite right. And of course now he's towering over Space Godzilla, which makes no damn sense. And how about we bring in another character from that movie, the SH Monsterarts Mogira? And wow, I never thought I'd have so many kaiju from Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla in my collection. And this is where the height comparison really breaks down. We bring in his older self, which is supposed to be his taller self, Godzilla Jr., and we can see there is barely any height difference here. Godzilla Jr., of course, is a little bit of a different pose than little Godzilla. We can see that little Godzilla is still way too big, and on the left, completely out of scale with everything. But just for the heck of it, to bring in more little Godzilla figures, we have the egg hatchling Zilla from Trendmasters. So overall, I'm kind of torn on little Godzilla. He's not a bad figure, he's just not one of the better SH Monsterarts figures. He's also one of the cheaper SH Monsterarts figures. So putting everything together, the value of it, the overall set, I'm gonna give him a very weak recommend, the cult classic status. It's definitely probably one of the weakest entries in the Monsterarts line, but it's still cool and it's still a fun little figure. I think if he hadn't come with the crystal accessories, I wouldn't be giving him that rating. The crystals really elevate him and make him fun for diorama building, and that's definitely something that I enjoyed to do with these Monsterarts figures, is to create scenes and take pictures of it. I think without it, how gappy the figure is and the limited articulation would have made me dislike this figure a little more. But overall, it's a decent representation of the character, and now we officially have all of the Heisei versions of young Godzilla that we can, outside of baby Godzilla, which theoretically would be a speck of plastic and could have come with these figures and we just never knew it because it was microscopic in comparison. Or since they are doing the larger Dorats and things like that coming up that are out of scale, maybe they will eventually do baby Godzilla. I'm not sure, but a very weak recommend for little Godzilla. Make sure you check me out on Instagram, username Outside the Box Reviews. Also check me out on Facebook, link below. And until next time, it's been their Outside the Box Reviews, Giant Monster Monday. Stay tuned for more to come.